The NFL Draft is a 3-day event preceded by a several month long process, and through these months, whether it's due to the player, the media, or teams wanting to tank a player's stock so they can draft them with their pick, narratives and expectations are created, and players have a general range of where they should be expected to be taken on draft day. But that doesn't mean every player should be taken where they will be taken, and a perfect example from last year would be Rams receiver Puka Nacua. Every year, there are players significantly overdrafted and drafted well after they should have been taken, like Puka was. And in today's video, we're going to break down 5 players that I view significantly different than the national media, along with a special guest. I don't like to make videos downplaying prospects or saying they will be a complete draft bust, because I don't think it's fair to the guy who's worked his entire life to get to where they are today. But in today's video, we will be breaking down players that are currently over and undervalued. And without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, we now welcome on a special guest. It is NBC Sports' Connor Rogers, also co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing 5 prospects that we view differently than the national media. So, Connor, go ahead and kick us off with a prospect that you are either significantly higher or lower on.
Yeah, Garrett, let's jump right into it. I think for me, somebody that I'm lower on right now, he's outside my top 150. He is in my top 200. My final 300 is coming out Monday, the week of the draft. Would be Leonard Taylor, the interior defensive lineman from Miami. I know I've seen, Arif Hassan, who does a really good job collecting big boards, has, some info that Taylor is right on the outside of the top 100 in the consensus, around like the 104 range. So it seems like I'm significantly lower on him. He's an interesting one because he came to Miami as a 5-star recruit, all the talent in the world. I think a lot of flashes in 2022 where when we went through the summer scouting process, you could look at a player like him and have big expectations and project him with the first round if he kind of gets a higher snap count, becomes a more complete player, not just flashes as a pass rusher, with twitchier, explosive pass rusher. And he didn't really improve on that 2020 season. Honestly, I actually thought it was a step back for him. And then you look at, developmental players that you want to take in the 3rd or 4th round because of pure athleticism. He's not a guy that tested well at all. I mean, for a defensive tackle, you're looking at 40th percentile, 10-yard split and 40-yard dash, 58th percentile vertical jump, 35th percentile 3-cone. I just take this for what it is, but 4th percentile hand size. So like Leonard Taylor for me, once upon a time, the next big thing at the U, and was just an okay player. And I don't see a great NFL draft prospect.
Absolutely. And I was actually on a Bleacher Report stream this week, and that was actually a player that I wouldn't mind my favorite team targeting late on day 3, just late, not a 4th round pick, not like 10. We pick at 107 currently. We'll see if the Vikings trade up. There's rumors that they're going to trade up, but I wouldn't mind them targeting him way late. But I'm a little lower on Leonard Taylor as well. But staying in the trenches for the first guy that I'm actually really, really high on, it is Big Mike Hall Jr. from Ohio State. Michael Hall is not going to be a run stuffer immediately. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to play an inside zone or duo, or if an NFC East team drafts him, you're definitely not going to want to have him try and stop the tush push. But I hope Michael Hall, a dream destination for me, is a team like the Bengals. They currently have 3 picks between 80 and 115. That mid to 3rd round, mid to 4th round, and if they could take him and have him get after the quarterbacks in the AFC in January, and whether it's a Mahomes or Allen or Stroud or Lamar, and have a quartet of Michael Hall Jr., Trey Hendrickson, who just had a career high in sacks this year, Sam Hubbard, and of course their 1st round pick from last year, Myles Murphy. I think Michael Hall could easily, just as a rotational piece, as a 1st-year player, just roll right into 4 or 5 sacks. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he finished with how this class is from a defensive perspective. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Hall finished top 6 or 7 in pressures in the class. So that's a guy that I'm pretty high on. But what has to be remembered is he's a chess piece. He's not going to be a guy that's going to come in from day 1 and start right out of the gate.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off that one. You have Hall. I have him in my top 75, so I think we see eye to eye on him. And right behind him in the top 75, I have Mo Camara from Colorado State. He seems to be almost the edge rusher version of Hall, where he's underappreciated. unlike Hall, he was insanely productive at Colorado State, double-digit sacks, a pressures machine, the guy that tested really well. When you look at that 10-yard split, that matters so much for edge rushers. Kamara was a guy that ended up having a 91st percentile 10-yard split at a 158. He's shorter, but he's, got compact muscle. He's not going to win with length. He's not going to win with size, but he's somebody that wins with an explosive nature. So Kamara, for me, if you want that value edge rusher that you're like Michael Hall, you're drafting when you're saying, hey, you're going in our maybe NASCAR package. We're looking at you as a pass rush specialist. I would put Mo Kamara in the edge rusher bracket of that in this draft.
No, I absolutely love Mo Kamara, and I was pretty surprised on Connor's pod when his co-host had Mo Kamara outside the top 20. I was a little taken back by that because I think Kamara is a really undervalued player in this class. But now a guy that I am out on is unfortunately North Carolina's Tez Walker. I had higher expectations for him heading into the year. I didn't think his routes were as crisp as you would have liked, especially in this class. Now, maybe in another class, maybe he's maybe a late second, early third round guy in another class. But when you are in, to me, what is a once in a lifetime class at the receiver position all the way across the board, he didn't stand out in a good way. And his 10-yard split was a 60th percentile, despite his 40 being a 91st percentile. So when your routes aren't crisp and your acceleration isn't the best in the class, or at least best, compared to what it could be, I'm a little out on Tez Walker. I personally don't think he should be a day 2 pick. I think he should be early day 3. And I think he had a pretty big fall from where he was relative to where he was at the beginning of the year.
It definitely seems that way. Walker did not have a great Senior Bowl. I still have him in my top 70. His strides chew up a lot of turf. He just needs to finish plays. I think that'll be really important for him. Continuing going down the board, I'll piggyback here maybe to somebody that I'm a little higher on. I think Tanner McLaughlin, the tight end from Arizona, who will probably be looked at as a late day 3 pick. I like him as an early day 3 pick. I have him in my top 150. He's he converted to tight end from wide receiver. You kind of see a lot of those receiver skills, excellent pass catcher, straight line speed. That's kind of tough for linebackers. Really good understanding of how to sit against zone coverage. Very urgent and creative after the catch. Like I love when they get the ball in this guy's hands to see what he could do to get upfield. And he could also just run right through defenders as well. 6'5", 244. So, not the heaviest tight end, but you're not drafting him to sit him as a Y and say, hey, block 90% of the game. So Tanner McLaughlin would be somebody to me that I feel like nobody cares about. And if I walked out of the 5th round with him, he might develop into my tight end 2 pretty quickly.
I got to be honest, Connor. I think this tight end class, while it's obviously not great, they have really good player at the top, but I think it's honestly a little underrated. I think that, people just kind of toss it aside, and people, outside of Brock Bowers and the occasional Jatavian Sanders mention, I think there's a lot of value on day 3. McLaughlin's one. And I also like Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. I'm a big Ben Sinnott guy. But my next guy is a guy that ran behind a top 5 prospect, and that is Notre Dame running back Audric Estime. Now, I think we were all disappointed with his 40-yard dash clocking in at 4.71, but this was one where I was just taken back because I didn't think the tape suggested that he ran a 4.71. And now, given that he is north of 220 pounds, there's not going to be a lot of times on tape where a guy like Estime gets out into the open field, and a guy that's going to have, a 60, 70-yard run where you can really see that 40-yard, that 40-yard dash in a true game setting. But there was one play in particular against NC State where he took it to the house, and I thought he looked a lot faster on that play specifically than 4.71 would indicate. But I think this is a guy that can come in. I mean, he's going to be a situational player early on, but I think he's a player that can, if he stays healthy, be a really good back throughout the length of his rookie contract. I would honestly like if a team took him at the end of day 2 and, start him out as a rotational guy, RB2. Rookie year, and then, slowly just give him more carries as the year goes on. And especially in December, when you really want to pound the rock and wear teams down as the game goes on in the cold weather. So I like Estime a lot, and he's, to me, one of the bigger sleepers in this class.
I've really turned the corner on Estime. He wasn't in my top 10 running backs when we did the running back show, and then I did a rewatch of him, and I regret it. He's going to end up hovering in my top 10 running backs on the final big board. You kind of throw the 40 out with him. He just does so many other things really, really well. I think, yeah, I'm totally with you. He's a guy I missed on in my initial rankings, and I'm glad I kind of got to revisit him before the final big board drops. I'll go back to somebody I'm lower on, and he's got a lot of buzz right now. That's Trevin Wallace, the linebacker out of Kentucky. He's somebody to me that I look at. I'll tell you where I have him. I have him at 167 right now. I think Wallace could sneak into day 2. If he doesn't, I think he'll come off the board in round 4. And, there's part of me that understands what people are excited about with an athletic linebacker in today's NFL like him. I mean, you're looking at 93rd percentile 40-yard dash, 4.5 140. The broad jump, 92nd percentile, 37.5-inch vertical is really, really good. He's playing closer to 240 pounds. Like, he's not small, and he's really, really athletic. But I just thought the tape at times left a lot to be desired with this guy where, I mean, you take him on day 3 and you like the developmental aspect, but I'm not taking him on day 2. I just think the IQ, it seems like he can make up for things in college football because he's so athletic. But in the NFL, you really got to feel it and see it. You can't always see it and then react. And that's the kind of guy he is. The recognition skills, the ability to diagnose is a step or 2 behind right now. I think the run, kind of reading his keys against the run just doesn't always look right. So he's someone to me where you watch him and you go, oh, okay, this is an interesting guy. Maybe he's going to be a really good special teamer for us out of the 6th round. And by year 3, you might be able to get on the field, a sub-package player. I think he's being viewed as a big-time prospect by the league, and I just have trouble kind of signing off on that at that position.
And it's also a little concerning, especially in a class that's not deep. Now,
No.
I am a little. I think that I like the tight end class for what it is. Obviously, it's not going to be what last year's tight end class was. That's the once in a couple year class. But this linebacker class overall, I was really, really underwhelmed, and it's not great when a linebacker can't stand out in this class. But my next guy is that I'm actually down on. People have asked throughout the draft process for me to make videos or make content on players that I'm down on. I'm not really into the whole let me spend a whole work day and a half making a video about why this guy's going to be a bust. That's not what I want to do.
It's not fun. Yeah. Nobody likes that.
Right. Yeah, like this guy's it's not what I want to do. But Chris Braswell from Alabama is a guy that I am not the biggest fan of, and I will say that Braswell's draft process has kind of went the way that I thought it would go. I mean, back in January, early February, there were rumblings and there would be occasional mock drafts where Braswell would sneak into the 1st round. And I was entirely out on the thought of him being a 1st round prospect. Now, I think he has kind of fallen down to mid to late 2. And that's where I think he should be taken. Now, if you told me right now that Braswell would go into a situation like Baltimore, he would play behind Odafe Oweh and he would just be in that package, and 3 or 4 years from now, he has a 12 sack season and he has 55 plus pressures. And, he has a typical Ravens breakout contract year. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But if you are entering a season with Braswell hoping to be your number 1, like if Atlanta took him after they took, hypothetically Rome Odunze at pick 8 and said, hey, Chris, we have no pass rush, go make something happen. I can't help but think that would be setting him up for failure. And even in one of Braswell's best games, which was actually against Texas A&M, he had 7 pressures, which was the second most that he had in a game all year. I went back and looked it up, just to see who he was beating. And he was beating a true freshman tackle that was like a 4-star prospect last year. And there's obviously no disrespect intended to that young fella on the Aggies. But I mean, if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be an NFL prospect. You know what I mean? So I'm a little out on Braswell as a top 50 guy.
I always worry about guys that really just love to win with speed to power, and then they don't bring the speed, they don't bring the power profile in the run game, right? That was my takeaway with Braswell, where I'm like, okay, if you're a little bit of a one-dimensional pass rusher, there's a lot of guys in the NFL like that hang on rosters and are starters for a long time. But it's because they do other things. And I don't think Braswell does other things. I think he's just a really good speed to power rusher in college. So you take that guy in round 2 because you think you can develop him. If you take that guy in the top 40, I start to have concerns, and it could be a product of a edge class that kind of falls off a cliff. So I don't think you're that far off there. Do you want me to finish with a positive one or another guy I'm a little bit lower on? I'll leave a dealer's choice to you here, Garrett.
We'll go. I'm ending on a positive, so I'll say negative.
Okay.
I'll say negative.
All right, so I'll go negative here. Let me go pretty far down the board and take a look.
Is it AD Mitchell? Because he's wide receiver 5.
I mean, it's funny for me. Like, I'm probably lower on like consensus when I stack the receivers, but Mitchell's still my 41st overall player in the draft. So, and I think Mitchell's gonna go a little earlier than that, but not 20 picks earlier than that. So that's a really weird one for me, man. Hold on one sec. I hate to be the great content guy delaying things here. I really want to go. You know who's interesting to me that I've seen really, really high, and I'm just lukewarm on, like end of third round, kind of hovering 80 to 90 range, is Marshawn Kneeland. He plays a tough brand of football. He can set the edge. He can rush with power. But am I taking that guy, a redshirt senior, in the second round? Like that to me, I don't see the ceiling with Marshawn Kneeland that you draft with pass rushers in the top 75. So I've been a little surprised how high people are with that one. One more down. I'll give you a bonus one. Johnny Wilson, I'm just naturally going to be lower on than everybody else. I think he's a fun player because he's really big and he's not slow for his size. But I don't think he has the best feet off the line of scrimmage, despite a lot of people kind of feeling the contrary to that. But throwing that all out the window, I don't think he's a natural pass catcher. Like everything just kind of seems to be to the body or stabbing. So Johnny Mitchell's a fun weapon. And I know a lot of people are like, well, he's a wide receiver, not a tight end. If he could develop his blocking at that size, I would like to see what he could do as a move tight end or a power slot. So naturally in this wide receiver class, I don't find myself gravitating to a player like Johnny Wilson in this wide pool of wide receivers that are going to go in the first 3 rounds. I see him as a true day 3 player, and I wouldn't even know if that's necessarily in the 4th round unless I had a really good plan for him.
Does it bring back shades of the infamous draft crush everyone had in Hakeem Butler?
It's not. He's a lot heavier, I want to say. I'd have to actually, let's see what Hakeem Butler was. And that wasn't, Hakeem Butler was 227, actually. That surprises me. I saw Hakeem Butler play in person his last year of college, and he looked so much lighter than that in person. And Johnny Wilson was 231. I mean, if you want to talk about why guys like that fail, then yes. I mean, you also forget when they're that big and not really, really light, head on really, really light feet, defenders get hands on them in the first 5, and you kind of congest them and you can crowd them a little bit more. So I don't know if like I have that level of concern, and I was pretty low on Butler that year, but yeah, I definitely think people become a little bit obsessed with guys that are definitely unicorns at the college level, but that doesn't mean they'll be a unicorn when it's the big boys of the NFL field.
No, absolutely. And everyone, especially in like the Madden era where it's prevalent. It's just like, let's just, throw it up, aggressive catch, and just, like just above the rim. And it's like,
he's not a great pass catcher.
Right. So, not everybody's T Higgins above the rim, especially when you're north of 6'4". But the last guy that I am really high on is Penn State center Hunter Nourzad. Yeah. I think he is just an all-around, just good football player. He is going to be a guy, especially with the 17 games. Both of our teams had quarterbacks go down last year, and then quarterbacks obviously take a lot less hits than offensive linemen do, every single play. So if you have a guy that can have the center and guard versatility and like Nourzad has, and actually Nourzad comes from Cornell University in his time previous to Penn State. You have a high IQ football player. And when you have a high IQ football player that has Ivy League experience, that also has Big Ten experience, that more than held his own during his time at Penn State, minus the whole Ohio State game, of course. But when you have a guy that can play any position along the interior, I refuse to believe that this is a guy that's not going to be, a 6 or 7 year player. He is a little older of a prospect. He's 24 coming out, but I think Nourzad is going to be a guy that will hold his own in the NFL for a long time, and a guy that's going to be an unsung hero. I know specifically for my team last year, granted this isn't the interior part of the play, but Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill both missed games last year, and we had a guy in David Questenberry step up. But if you have an interior offensive lineman go down, any 3 of them, which is going to happen, you need a guy like Hunter Nourzad to be able to step in.
Yeah, and you're right. He's somebody that's kind of that late bloomer because he's a transfer, and then you kind of get into the tape where you're watching the Penn State offensive line, and you're like, "Damn, they got Caden Wallace, they got obviously Olu Fashanu." Like, you watch that group, and it's just a very, very draftable group across the board of guys that probably are all going to start in the NFL level somewhat early. And how about Cornell? I'm pretty sure Jadlix Hunt transferred from Cornell as well. So you're talking about 2 transfers out of that program that are significantly on the draft radar this year.
Also, I forgot to mention Cornell legend JC Tretter. So we got some interior.
Nice callback.
Yep.
Yeah,
I thought about that this
callback.
morning. I thought about that this morning when I was writing it down, and then I forgot to mention it when I was on my spiel about Hunter Nourzad. But that will wrap up today's video. Hope you enjoyed. Appreciate you, Connor, for coming on. And like I said, check out the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. And Connor, any last closing words?
No, dude, I really appreciate you having me on. It's great to see this channel just explode in growth every time we catch up. It's unbelievable to watch. We're trying to catch up to you on the NFL Stock Exchange. So if you want more draft content, join Trevor and I there. And thank you, Garrett. I appreciate it.